Hey there, my name is Ava and I have about a 20-minute video here showcasing the process of redoing my parents' basement bathroom. We focus on the floors for this video as things we found under the old floors were a little unexpected and nasty, and I had little to no experience ever doing something like this before. I wanted to showcase the process to hopefully make redoing that scary basement bathroom or just starting that scary project easier for anybody that's interested, and to also just show that remodeling things that may seem inaccessible are actually easier than you think, especially with resources like YouTube, the internet, and hopefully this video. You can do a lot more than you expect. So without further ado, here's the video and I hope it helps. Okay, so our first step was getting the toilet off the floor. It's pretty simple to unbolt it, and yeah, definitely get a buddy, carry it out, put it on something you don't mind getting a little wet and gross. And then we just went to town ripping these floors up. They came up really easy, surprisingly, which was nice. But you can see we didn't have any safety gear on, which was a mistake. We found dead mice, black mold, all these things. So we quickly realized it was important to have the proper safety gear on, and then plugged up that sewage hole because the smell is gross. But yeah, we put on some respirators and some gloves and really got to it. See the black mold there. You can see it's just nasty under everything. This little tool was really useful. This painter's tool just started scraping all the grossness away. Toilets have wax rings, so you can just scrape them right off. Getting all the old, sealant next to the tub and everything we could scrape away was the first step. Getting all those details up. So then we could lay down or pour down a hydrogen peroxide solution, and we let that sit for multiple hours to take some of this nastiness up. Then we got the wire attachment. You can just attach it right to any normal drill, and started going to town, really taking off a layer of all the nastiness. And it's not shown in the clips, but we used a bit of a heavier duty angle grinder with a concrete scraper type attachment to just completely take down the floors where any black mold or anything really gross was, to try and just ensure that none of that came back. Then we were ready for tiles. So you can see I have another drill attachment mixing up some mortar right there, and I'll kind of explain a little bit. I know these clips are going fast, but there's a lot of tile laying kind of shown in here. So you mix up the mortar. I did mine to like a thick peanut butter consistency because I'm using larger tiles and we have uneven basement bathroom floors. And then when you have your mortar all mixed up, try and get all the dry clumps out. Then you can start putting some on the floor with a trowel. The distance of the teeth can be a bit wider the bigger you're going. I could have probably used one with even wider teeth, but this ended up working out great for the situation. So then, yeah, I would lay a good layer of mortar on the floor, and then I also back buttered the tiles because of being worried about the unevenness and just wanting to make sure that they had mortar supporting all corners and angles of them, making sure they had a good foundation to sit on so they're not wobbly and uneven, so they don't snap when they set. That's the biggest concern. So then, yeah, I just went in and laid them down. Once you set them down, even when the mortar's not dry, it's hard to take them back up again. So you want to really plan where you're putting these things. Get some spacers. They come in big bags. They're really cheap. Those are those little white things I'm putting in between. And they just ensure that everything's equally spaced, neat and tidy. What we did before we started this was we just figured out the best way in which we could lay as many whole tiles as possible. On the package, it has a recommendation of how to kind of offset them. You can see I just didn't stick them in a straight line, and it looks better and kind of just plays out in a way that makes sense, to minimize your cutting a little bit, which seems contradictory, but it really works. So this recommended maybe like a 15 to 30% offset on the tile package, and I think we did, yeah, maybe in the 20% range of offset. But yeah, we laid all these out and just had them on the floor, not stuck down before, so we could figure out where we're going to put all these tiles. And then I just went to town on getting them affixated to the floor. And other than the trowel and the mortar bucket, I had a clean bucket of water. The sponge that we also use for grout, I bought a couple sponges. Really useful for just wiping up mortar that falls on the tiles. And I also had that little painter's tool, just like a flat scraper, a little different than the one I was using to scrape up stuff off the floor. But that helped for just little detailed areas, nooks and crannies, scraping extra mortar that fell on the floor, all of the above. And then, yeah, that little container, people who are really good at it will, have a bunch of mortar there and just scrape perfectly with the trowel and go really fast. But I've never done this before, so it was more of a useful place to just put my stuff or scrape a little extra mortar that fell. But yeah, you can see we got all the whole tiles in, and then we just have to make some cuts along the side to fit some in, a couple along the bathtub, and then we got some little bit harder cuts by the toilet. But yeah, this is the next day when everything's dry. Did a walkover, nothing's cracking, and took the spacers out. Looking pretty good. Was super proud of my first go with the tiles. And yeah, now is the moment of truth of really getting into some harder cuts. And just making everything hopefully fit in a way that looks good. I started with the one along the walls there. Really all that needed to happen was we just needed to take a little bit off the end of each tile. I could fit like 3 or 4 there. Take that little bit off right there, just like I pointed to. And I used the manual cutter for that, which we'll get into how to use that right now. So this is the manual tile cutter. It's super easy, and it worked for even these longer cuts. That's the little wheel that scores it, and then behind it is a little foot right there, which you use to put over the tile and then apply equal pressure and snap over where you're scored. So this is like the biggest cut you can make on this thing, and I'd only used it for small cuts with very limited experience before. You can see I'm reminding myself, if you put that lever up, then you can stick the foot up. It has a little magnet behind. So yeah, make sure that foot's out of the way, and then you can get your wheel over on the edge the way you want it. And just with, light but firm pressure, you just want to do one smooth score. Just push it all the way to the end like that. And then you take it back, and that foot naturally falls. And then you just give it a good solid kind of, see, I'm doing like slow but firm. That was like maximum push you can do. You don't want to go any crazier than that. And luckily I got it to snap after giving it a little go, a bit lower. Got a clean snap. This is about probably the most advanced type of cut you could do on this thing, and it still worked great. You can see this is like an easier cut here. Probably more standard of how people use this thing. But yeah, the key is you don't want to go over your score line multiple times. You just want to get one smooth score line. The machine makes it easy to line up so you're getting your lines straight. So just, I marked with a little pencil where I measured, and then I put the little wheel over the little pencil, made sure everything's lined up, and then just did one smooth push, one firm, but not too firm, not too fast, not too crazy, just kind of that gentle, firm pressure of a snap. Yeah, this thing is really great. They don't need electricity, they're not too expensive, and they do perfect for just any straight edges you need to take off tiles. Super beginner friendly. You're not gonna hurt yourself or anything. And yeah, it worked just excellent for all these cuts. That makes really clean cuts too, which is great. So then for the harder cuts, we have this guy right here. It's kind of like a table saw, but for tiles. That blade is not sharp though. It won't cut your fingers, which is really nice. It can be a little scary, but it's not actually gonna hurt you. Under here is water. It's essential that you have the water filled in this tray. You want to put it in between the minimum and maximum lines, kind of like detergent or something on the laundry machine. And then you just flip that switch on and push stuff through, just like a table saw. It doesn't make the cleanest cuts. This is a bit of an older one I was borrowing from my neighbor, but it's really useful for hard corners or curved cuts, as you'll see coming up. So for difficult corners and things like that, I use this system where I just took, this was just paper that came in the tile box, and I would just cut it to fit exactly where I wanted my tile to be, and then use this to trace over tiles and then cut them. And it worked out beautifully. You can see I got all those little tough pieces in by the door. And then the plan is to put a little kind of coping, I don't know what you would call it, but there's kind of little wood things that can go over the base of the door like that. The sliding door has a little gap, so that'll fill in that bit. And then yeah, just using the same process for those difficult cuts around the toilet. I opted for like one bigger tile with a curve and then two smaller ones for those final pieces. Definitely write F or front on your paper, because what I did was I kept doing the wrong side of it and my tile would fit, but it would be backwards. But here's the process of making a curve cut. You can't just shove something through that tile saw in a curved manner. It cuts straight. So what my neighbor who I borrowed this from recommended was to kind of make little lines like that, and then it'll kind of naturally fall out while not putting too much pressure on the saw or the tile, because tiles crack. So yeah, here you can see I'm just pushing it straight through. You can see that water kind of spits out. Make sure things aren't cracking all over the place. And initially the water will kind of shoot out a little line, which also gives you a good idea of where you're cutting without having to lift that whole blade guard up. Definitely wear safety glasses. Little shards can shoot out in unexpected ways. And yeah, I'm only shoving my fingers down there again because this is not a blade that will cut you. Although I still turned it off to get little pieces out all the time, just to be safe. So here's me explaining that I did it backwards. And so to remedy that, I just took this the way it needed to be, popped it over a new tile to trace, and I also tested to see if that fit. It was a good test cut. I definitely recommend buying extra tiles. Usually you'll end up with a couple extra because they come in packs. I just got these at Home Depot. They were only like about $40 a pack, I think. They feel and look like real stone, and were, not too horrible to work with, and they didn't crack in these uneven floors. So I definitely recommend them. You can make things look nice without it breaking the bank. So here you can see we got all those little weird pieces in. I was super proud of myself. Took this painter's tool that I was using earlier for some mortar details to kind of scrape out any mortar that was rising through through the cracks. Ideally, you can try to make sure that doesn't happen when you're laying them, but of course there's always trial and error when you're just trying something new. So then it was time to go for grout. Super similar to mortar, it just comes in a powdered bag, also super easy to find any hardware store, not too expensive. The mortar, I wanted to have more of like a thick peanut butter consistency to it. As I said, the floors are uneven, and you want the tiles to have like a good solid base to sit on. The grout can be more like a melted ice cream texture. I did some research, and that is what I determined. You want it to really be able to get into the cracks of the tile, which is what you use this for. Not to be confused with the other sponges or a trowel. Looks like a trowel, but it has a sponge on the bottom. So yeah, then we just poured the dust in, slowly added water until we got the right texture. Use that same drill attachment, which is super handy. Also not hard to come by. Also borrowed from my neighbor. And just slowly mixed it up till we got the consistency we wanted. It's also a really good idea to wash this stuff off your drill immediately. You can see that's from like an old project my neighbor did. It'll just stay on there if you don't rinse it immediately. So then we started on grout. It's really messy, as everyone says. It can be a little intimidating, but it's really not that bad. So you can see I'm just going through with what looks like a trowel, but it has a sponge on the bottom. I don't know if it's also called a grout sponge. There's those big yellow sponges, which is what you use to do the final kind of wipe away. But the process is simple. You take your grout on your flat trowel-like tool, that is really a sponge, and you force it kind of back and forth into the cracks, and then if you come through kind of diagonally with that thing, then it kind of scrapes an even layer in the cracks. Of course, this was my first time doing this. It took a while. It kind of like, it's kind of a just do it, and you'll get in the zone. You'll figure out what process works best for you, especially if you're doing a pretty neutral colored floor like this with larger tiles and gray grout like I'm using right here. It's really not too difficult. You'll definitely just kind of be shimmying back and forth. You'll notice places where there needs to be more grout in the cracks. You'll keep wiping with a sponge, and there'll be endless grout dust and liquid and things. But, you know, it's kind of like, it really is like a Karate Kid wax on, wax off type of situation. You just kind of repeat through the motions, take care of where more grout is needed and where you need to fix little details. And you can always come back and fix some things if it all dries and you realize you missed a couple. I don't think it would be the end of the world to just come back and make little fixes. But yeah, definitely just try to get it in there as good as possible. You can see me going back and forth, filling in cracks as needed, and then yeah, doing that final wipe with that big sponge and a clean bucket of water. Super useful things to have for both this and the mortar laying. But overall, as as projects go with tools needed to actually buy new from the store, we really didn't need to get a whole lot for this one. So many neighbors around had stuff from previous projects, and it's a great way to connect with people, save money, just build community in the neighborhood, and learn how to use some tools. So yeah, once I was done with this process, there was still that kind of stubborn layer of dry dust, which at first I was a little anxious about, but did some research. Turns out that's completely normal, and a microfiber cloth like I have here was the lifesaver. I just kind of went through and carefully buffed dry. Didn't you didn't need to put any product on it, and you just keep wiping away at the dust over time. We got most of it up here, and then we were ready to put the toilet back on. As you can see, we got a new wax ring there. We got an extra large one, and we stuck the toilet back on. Everything was looking pretty good. We're starting to put trim on. But then we realized that because we put some tile on it, raised the floor a bit, even with our extra large wax ring, we couldn't get the bolts of the toilet on exactly how we wanted. It just wasn't super solid on the floor. It looked great. We wanted to be done, but it's really important to make sure that, you know, all your plumbing fixtures are on the floor correctly. We don't want them to leak and ruin the tile we just did and have another black mold situation. So what we ended up doing that we unfortunately don't have clips on because it was a bit of a scramble before I had to go back to school and edit this whole thing. So here you'll just see some before and after pictures to tie this all up. What my dad ended up doing off camera is at the hardware store, he found kind of an extender to attach to the base of the toilet ring. We couldn't remove ours and get a new one because it was so rusted, and this house is quite old, and we just didn't want to jackhammer into the concrete and mess anything up. So we found a really handy extender at the store and bolt extenders as well, and he was able to just install those, extend the bolts, then put another new wax ring on top of that and get that toilet properly fixated, carefully shimmy all that trim back in there. And yeah, it's looking great now, and nothing's leaking. It smells so much better, and I'm so happy that we tackled this project. I would just say that anyone should go for it. Use YouTube as a resource. Hopefully this is kind of just a good quick guide of the step-by-steps. And yeah, borrow tools from neighbors and get learning. You'll be surprised at what you can do.